In a world often shaken by conflict, inequality, and indifference, there emerged a man whose voice spoke with tenderness, whose hands reached out in compassion, and whose heart beat in rhythm with the most forgotten and vulnerable among us. That man was Pope Francis, a humble man who became a light of hope for the entire planet. From the streets of Buenos Aires to the grandeur of the Vatican, his journey has been marked by love, not by titles, but by service. He has reminded humanity of the strength found in simplicity, the beauty of mercy, and the dignity of every person, no matter their background, faith, or status. Pope Francis has not only led the Catholic Church with wisdom and humility, but has touched lives far beyond its walls. Through every smile, every embrace, and every word of encouragement, he has embodied what it truly means to be a man of God, a father to the poor, a voice for the voiceless, and a friend to all. In this video, we will walk through the life of a man who has inspired millions with his goodness, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to peace, justice, and human dignity. This is not just the story of a pope, it is the story of a soul who, by walking humbly with God, has changed the world for the better. Early life in Buenos Aires. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was born on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, into a deeply Catholic, working-class family. His parents, Mario and Regina, were Italian immigrants who instilled in him the values of hard work, humility, and faith. From a young age, Jorge demonstrated a compassionate heart and a keen intellect. He was close to his siblings and often helped around the house and in his community. These early years in the bustling yet modest neighborhoods of Buenos Aires would shape his lifelong mission of service to the poor and forgotten. Growing up in Argentina, Jorge saw firsthand the inequalities and struggles faced by many of his fellow citizens. These early encounters with poverty and hardship awakened a profound sense of empathy within him. He worked briefly as a chemical technician, all while discerning a deeper purpose. Eventually, his calling to the priesthood became undeniable. A life of service begins. In 1958, at the age of 21, Jorge entered the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits. This decision marked the beginning of a life entirely devoted to God and humanity. The Jesuits are known for their commitment to education, social justice, and missionary work, all values that would become hallmarks of Bergoglio's life. He was ordained a priest in 1969 and quickly gained a reputation for his humility, simplicity, and devotion. Unlike many others in positions of leadership, Bergoglio refused luxury. He lived in a modest apartment, cooked his own meals, and often rode public transportation. He did not seek recognition or power. Instead, he focused on being present for the people, especially the poor, the sick, and the marginalized. These acts of humility would define him throughout his life, and later as the spiritual leader of over 1 billion Catholics, becoming Archbishop of Buenos Aires. In 1998, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was appointed Archbishop of Buenos Aires, a role that would place him at the spiritual and moral center of Argentina's capital. Rather than embrace the privileges that came with his new title, Bergoglio chose a path of deeper simplicity and proximity to the people. He declined the luxurious archbishop's residence and instead opted for a modest apartment in downtown Buenos Aires. He continued cooking his own meals, traveling by bus and subway, and walking the streets just as he had always done. As archbishop, he became an icon of humility, but also a pillar of strength for a city grappling with economic crisis, inequality, and social unrest. The late 1990s and early 2000s were a time of intense hardship for many Argentinians. The country faced financial collapse, widespread poverty, and growing disillusionment. In the midst of this, Archbishop Bergoglio stood firm as a voice of hope and conscience. He not only preached solidarity and compassion, he embodied it. He tirelessly visited hospitals, nursing homes, and the city's poorest slums, where makeshift homes lined unpaved streets and families struggled to find their next meal. He made it a point to know people by name, to listen to their stories, and to remember their needs in prayer. He was often seen walking alone through the villas Miseria, shanty towns, carrying only his small black briefcase and a warm smile. People loved him not because of his title, but because of his presence. He was close, accessible, and human. His homilies were powerful, not because of grand rhetoric, but because of their honesty and relevance. He addressed the issues that affected ordinary people: unemployment, violence, addiction, injustice, and loneliness. But he never fell into despair. Instead, he pointed toward a future rooted in faith, resilience, and collective care. He encouraged the church to go beyond the walls of the cathedral and enter the streets, to bring Christ's love to those who needed it most. Education was another area where Bergoglio left a lasting impact. He emphasized the importance of forming hearts as well as minds. Under his guidance, Catholic institutions in Buenos Aires renewed their commitment to educating the poor and creating spaces of inclusion and dignity. He championed programs for young people, especially those at risk, and supported initiatives that empowered women, children, and marginalized communities. Bergoglio also fostered interfaith dialogue, building bridges with Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, and secular leaders in Argentina. At a time when division and mistrust were prevalent, he sought unity and peace. He often met privately with leaders of other faiths, sharing meals, prayers, and mutual support. His belief was simple: we are all brothers and sisters, created by God and called to live together in harmony. Despite his growing reputation, Bergoglio remained deeply reserved and often tried to avoid the spotlight. He turned down appointments in the Vatican several times, preferring to stay close to his people. But his humility only increased his influence. People saw in him a pastor who lived what he preached, a man who chose service over power and compassion over prestige. One of the most symbolic acts of his time as Archbishop came during Holy Thursday Masses, where he would often wash the feet of drug addicts, the elderly, and people living on the streets. This act, mirroring Jesus at the Last Supper, was not a performance, but a genuine gesture of love. He knelt before them, touched their feet, and reminded them that they were worthy, valued, and loved. His leadership inspired a new way of being church, one that was less about hierarchy and more about community, less about rules and more about relationship, less about doctrine and more about living the gospel in everyday life. For Bergoglio, the church wasn't just a building or an institution. It was the people, especially the broken, the suffering, and the forgotten. By the time he was named a cardinal by Pope John Paul II in 2001, Bergoglio was already a spiritual beacon in Argentina. But even with the red hat of a cardinal, nothing about him changed. He continued riding the bus. He continued visiting the sick. He continued living a life that pointed not to himself, but to God's mercy. The election of Pope Francis. On the evening of March 13, 2013, the world's attention turned to the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. After days of prayer and deliberation among the College of Cardinals, white smoke rose into the Roman sky, a centuries-old signal that a new pope had been elected. The bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang with joy. Catholics across the globe held their breath in anticipation. Who would be the next spiritual leader of the Church? few could have predicted what came next. When Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran stepped out onto the central balcony and announced Habemus Papam, the name that followed, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, was met with surprise. He was not among the most talked about candidates. In fact, many outside of Latin America had never heard of him. But within seconds, he would begin to transform the global perception of what it meant to be Pope. He chose the name Francis, becoming the first pontiff in history to do so. The choice was deeply symbolic. He took the name in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi, a man known for his love of the poor, his simplicity, his humility, and his care for all of God's creation. With that simple act, Pope Francis revealed his vision for his papacy, a church rooted in service, compassion, and closeness to the marginalized. From the very beginning, his actions spoke louder than words. As he stood on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica for the first time, he did not begin with a long speech or formal blessing. Instead, he humbly bowed his head and asked the people to pray for him. It was a moment that moved millions to tears, a gesture of humility that echoed around the world. He wore a simple white cassock, choosing to forego the more elaborate red mozzetta traditionally worn by new popes. He waved gently, smiled modestly, and broke the formal atmosphere with warmth and approachability. In that moment, people saw not a monarch or ruler, but a pastor, a spiritual father who would walk beside them. His election was historic for several reasons. Pope Francis was the first Jesuit pope, representing an order known for intellectual rigor, social justice, and missionary zeal. He was also the first pope from the Americas, and the first from the Southern Hemisphere, a powerful reminder that the Church is truly global, and that its heart beats in every corner of the earth. For Latin Americans, his election brought a deep sense of pride and hope. For the poor and forgotten, it felt like a door had been opened. Within days, it was clear that this would be a papacy like no other. He declined the luxurious papal apartment in the Apostolic Palace, choosing instead to live in the more modest Casa Santa Marta, a Vatican guest house where he could be close to others. He insisted on paying his own hotel bill after the conclave. He wore plain black shoes rather than the traditional red, and he chose a simple iron cross rather than one of gold or jewels. These were not mere symbols. They were signs of a new era for the Church. But more than anything, Pope Francis's election marked a shift in tone. He began to speak consistently about the need for a poor church for the poor. He emphasized mercy over judgment, closeness over formality, and dialogue over condemnation. He called on the Church to step outside its comfort zones and to bring the light of the gospel to the margins of society. His papacy began with profound gestures, washing the feet of prisoners during Holy Week, visiting migrants on the Italian island of Lampedusa, embracing people with disfigurements and disabilities. He chose to go where the pain was, to listen, to comfort, and to affirm the dignity of every person. The world quickly fell in love with his authenticity. He became a moral voice not only for Catholics, but for people of all backgrounds. Politicians, atheists, journalists, and everyday citizens found themselves inspired by his humility, courage, and clarity of purpose. Time magazine named him Person of the Year in 2013, describing him as the People's Pope. But Pope Francis never let popularity distract him from his mission. He remained focused on leading the Church as a servant leader, one who lifts up the lowly, heals the brokenhearted, and invites everyone to encounter God's infinite mercy. The day he was elected, Jorge Mario Bergoglio became Pope Francis, but he did not become someone new. He remained the same humble man from Buenos Aires, a priest of the people, a shepherd who smells like his sheep, and a quiet force for love in a world that so desperately needs it. A pope close to the people. From the moment he stepped onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, it was clear that Pope Francis would be a different kind of leader. He was not interested in grandeur or protocol. He wanted to be close to the people, not above them, but among them. And over the years, this closeness became not solo a personal trait, but the very hallmark of his papacy. Pope Francis broke down the invisible walls that had sometimes separated the papacy from the lives of ordinary people. He insisted that the church must be like a field hospital after battle, a place of healing and comfort for those who suffer. He called on priests, bishops, and all Catholics to go out into the streets, to the peripheries, to the margins, wherever people were hurting, abandoned, or in need of love. His weekly audiences in St. Peter's Square became more than formal gatherings. They became heartfelt encounters. He would stop his Pope-mobile to bless babies, to hug children, to speak with elderly people or those in wheelchairs. He made time to listen to stories of suffering, loss, and hope. People didn't just see a pope, they saw a friend, a father, a spiritual guide who genuinely cared. Pope Francis understood the transformative power of human touch and attention. In one unforgettable moment, he embraced a man disfigured by neurofibromatosis, pressing his cheek tenderly against his wounds. The image went around the world, not because it was staged, but because it was sincere. It was the gospel lived out in real time, mercy, compassion, and dignity, shown not with words, but with love. He continued to visit prisons, washing the feet of inmates, both men and women of all religions, on Holy Thursday. He visited refugee camps and spoke out on behalf of those fleeing war, hunger, and poverty. He welcomed the homeless into the Vatican and even had showers and a barber's chair installed near St. Peter's Basilica for those living on the streets. He believed that no one should be invisible in the eyes of the Church. Pope Francis often picked up the phone to call people directly, whether to comfort a grieving widow, encourage a struggling priest, or thank someone for a letter. These weren't press events or publicized gestures. They were acts of genuine personal connection. He never lost touch with the importance of individual human lives, each created and loved by God. His language, too, reflected his desire to reach hearts. He spoke simply, directly, and warmly. His homilies were filled with everyday imagery and heartfelt anecdotes. He wanted people to understand, to feel included, to know that faith was not reserved for the few, but was a gift for all. He especially connected with young people, often reminding them, "Do not let yourselves be robbed of hope." He encouraged them to dream big, to take risks for what is right, to serve others boldly. Under his leadership, World Youth Days became more than just celebrations. They became powerful movements of joy, unity, and mission. He challenged young people to be active protagonists of change, not just observers of the world. Pope Francis was also close to those who had felt far from the Church. He reminded them, again and again, that God never tires of forgiving. He invited everyone to come back, not with shame, but with trust. He opened doors, not closed them. He built bridges, not walls. His entire approach reflected the heart of Christ: to be present, to be near, to love without conditions. He showed the world that the Pope is not a distant figurehead, but a shepherd who walks with his flock, who listens to their pain, who shares in their joys and sorrows. Whether it was through a smile, a blessing, a handwritten note, or a moment of silence, Pope Francis became a beacon of hope for millions. He reminded the world that greatness lies in humility, that power finds its highest form in service, and that love is the most revolutionary force of all. The joy of the gospel. In 2013, he published his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the Joy of the Gospel, a passionate call for the Church to rediscover its mission of evangelization, not through words alone, but through actions and presence. He urged Christians to go out into the streets, to share love and joy, and to reach those who feel abandoned. This document wasn't just a set of instructions. It was a reflection of Pope Francis's own heart, a heart full of love, concern, and hope for humanity. He wanted every person, regardless of their background or belief, to feel the embrace of God's mercy. Laudato Si, caring for our common home. In 2015, Pope Francis made history by releasing the encyclical Laudato Si, a powerful letter to the world about the care of our planet. In it, he called for urgent action to address climate change and environmental degradation. But more than that, he reminded the world that caring for creation is not just a political or scientific issue, it's a spiritual one. He spoke of the interconnectedness of all life and the moral responsibility to protect the earth for future generations. This message resonated far beyond the Catholic Church and inspired people of all faiths to join together in caring for our common home, a voice for the voiceless. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis consistently stood up for those who had no voice. He visited migrant camps in Greece, embraced lepers and the disabled, and welcomed prisoners with open arms. He condemned violence, war, and human trafficking. He encouraged dialogue between religions, cultures, and nations. He always chose compassion over condemnation, simplicity over spectacle, and hope over despair. His voice brought light into dark corners of the world. He reminded everyone that each human being has dignity and worth, a legacy of love and humility. Pope Francis is not a man who sought fame or prestige. He simply wanted to serve, to walk with the poor, to comfort the afflicted, and to be a bridge between heaven and earth. His life has been a testament to the power of humility, the strength of mercy, and the transformative force of love. In every homily, every embrace, every journey to the edges of society, Pope Francis showed us what it means to live the gospel. He reminded us that greatness is not found in power or wealth, but in the quiet acts of kindness we offer to one another. The Good Shepherd. Pope Francis will be remembered not just as a pope, but as a true shepherd, a man who walked with his flock, who carried the burdens of others, and who never tired of doing good. His life is a powerful example of what it means to be human, to love without condition, and to serve with joy. In a world often divided by conflict and fear, Pope Francis stood as a beacon of peace, unity, and hope. His message was simple yet profound. Love one another, care for the poor, protect the earth, and never lose faith in the goodness of humanity. He reminded us that, with even the smallest act of love, we can change the world. If you enjoyed this video and felt inspired by the life and legacy of Pope Francis, don't forget to give it a like and share it with others who might need a message of hope today. And if you want to keep discovering more stories about extraordinary people who have left a mark on the world through kindness, courage, and compassion, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and keep spreading goodness wherever you go.